Hey guys, and welcome to the Alabama Saltwater Fishing Report presented by Great Days Outdoors magazine, the first podcast to bring you the local inshore, offshore, and onshore fishing report, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. We have a great show lined up, but first, let's hear who is making the show possible this week. This week's Alabama Saltwater Fishing Report is brought to you by Great Days Outdoors magazine. Are you looking for that one-of-a-kind gift for Father's or Mother's Day? If so, head on over to greatdaysoutdoors.com and check out the best gifts for outdoorsmen 2021. We've curated a bunch of unique gift ideas to help you find an awesome gift for the outdoorsman on your list. Just head over to greatdaysoutdoors.com/best gifts for outdoorsmen to check it out. And also brought to you by Hilton's Offshore Charts. The days of heading out and blindly looking for good fishing areas are pretty much over. Don't waste time and money on fuel searching for fish. You need the most recent, highest resolution images to not only know where to go, but where not to go. The knowledge provided by today's technology is critical when planning an offshore fishing trip. Make the choice that professional captains all over the Gulf make and choose Hilton's Real-Time Navigator. The easy-to-use interface and excellent customer service will have you on the fish every time you go. Check them out at hiltonsoffshore.com. All right, guys and gals, I am your host, Butch Theory, and I am joined today with Captain Dusty Hayes. How are we doing today, Dusty?
Oh, good, man. Good. I resting up today, off. That wind kind of keeps us off the water today, but it's nice to have a day off for sure.
Yeah, no doubt, man. It's good to have you back on here co-hosting. It's been a long time, probably around this time last year, actually.
Yeah, it's been a while. I think did it with Joe on the Florida report back.
That's right.
A few months ago, and then it's been a while since I've been on here with you. So glad to be back.
Yeah, man. Welcome back. Fishing's heating up, man. I've been seeing a ton of good offshore stuff. Finally had a good little window there for our offshore guys to get out. It wasn't much of one. I think they took a beating on the way out, but I saw some swords get smacked for sure.
Oh yeah, lots of swordfish. I didn't see much else, but I did see a lot of guys catching sword. I see, a lot of guys going 2 for 3 and stuff like that. And it's crazy at the shop. And people, it's like as soon as we get a calm day, it's guys bringing in reels left and right to get rigged up for swordfish, and just everybody's got that on the brain all the time now. It's gaining popularity for sure, and we definitely have a decent fishery for it because there's a high success rate. So it's something that big fish, and it's very technical and fun, and a lot of people are getting into it, and I don't blame them.
It's new, man. It's new and hot. I mean, I've been offshore fishing pretty much my whole life, but I would say, I know we talked about it on here before, but I mean, probably last 10 years, I would say the daytime's probably blown up. It was just sword fishing in the Gulf was just kind of an afterthought for us, at the end of a trip, throw off some squid with a couple siloam sticks and, say peace to it. And if one got on, great. If not, that was pretty much the extent of everybody's sword fishing. And now, I mean, it's hot. They're getting it figured out, and guys like Adam and Richard and them are getting them dialed in, and Shane, they're dialing them in, man, and being, like you said, super highly successful. So that's super cool.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I love catching big fish that are delicious.
Yeah, they're hard to beat, man. They're good eating.
Yes, they are. Well, speaking of things that are kind of not new but gaining popularity, man, pompano fishing. People have been surf fishing like crazy. Tell us a little bit about what's going on over at Sam's Stop and Shop and the Pomp Stomp.
It's been a crazy year. We've had tons of entries, a lot of people fishing, and it's just great to see. A lot of people getting into it. And surf fishing is one of those things that it's as simple as getting a few setups and going out there and doing it. It's not something that's really overdone, that you have to be a professional to be good at it. There's a lot of just weekend, everyday guys that are really catching a lot of fish, and the variety is there. The thing about pompano fishing is if you're pompano fishing, you're looking at possibly catching Spanish and ladyfish and bluefish and whiting and redfish and black drum and flounder. And, guys catch juvenile cobia all the time, sometimes keeper cobia all the time this time of year. It's just something cool that, you don't have to be rich. You don't have to have a big center console or a yacht. All you have to do is pretty much just, spend the time and go out there, and it's something great to do with kids. And I think that's why it's kind of picked up popularity, especially with the pier not being completely open now. It gives somebody like your weekend guys somewhere to go catch fish and have a good opportunity of catching good keeper fish, and not having to spend a few $1,000s to do it. You can put
or a few $100,000 for that matter.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The sky's the limit on all that stuff. And it's basically once you kind of get a few setups and people start getting pier carts and all that, you can tie your own rigs, and it's almost kind of relies on itself. As far as once you get your baseline of tackle and gear, you don't have to keep buying stuff to really be successful at it. You can, obviously, because that's, what makes anything outdoors fun is buying all the stuff that goes with it. But
That's right.
yeah, it's not something you're putting, fuel in the boat every weekend or something like that. It really pays for itself. I'm, with surf fishing personally, I'm actually kind of a cheap wad just because I know you can get away with so little. I've had the same setups for years, rod and reel wise. I've had the same sand spikes that I made for a long, long time. I've had the same beach cart for a long time. I really hadn't put any money in surf fishing. I might buy some leader and hooks here and there, but that's about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely simplifies things.
Yeah, it's definitely a cheap way to get into some quality fish, and it's an easy access for pretty much anybody.
Yep, for sure, man. Well, we're gonna check in with the Beach Bum, see what he's been up to. He hadn't been on the show for a while. We'll get a bum update. But first, man, I saw where they released the recreational red snapper days. So let's go hear from the horse's mouth. Let's go check in with Director of the Alabama Marine Resources Division, Scott Bannon. All right, Mr. Scott, welcome back to the show, buddy. We saw recently where we have some recreational red snapper days allocated. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, so thanks for having me on, guys. And as always, I'm generally excited to talk about red snapper because people are excited to fish for red snappers. We announced our season this week. We're going to run a similar season to what we've done in the past or last year. Beginning Memorial Day weekend and running 4-day weekends. So starting that Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. And we're going to run until we anticipate the quota being met. And so we don't have a final number from the National Marine Fishery Service as to exactly the quota, but we think it's going to be similar to what we had last year. So around a million pounds. And so we're not announcing a closing date this year because there are so many different things that impact the effort, like the weather impacts it. The last year it was COVID, and a tremendous number of people went fishing because they didn't have other activities, and so we decided to just continue like we've done in the past. And we have a page at OutdoorAlabama.com, and there'll be a snapper summary, and you can track the progress. We'll probably post it about every other week, and you can see the trend and the pounds and where we are. And as we get closer to the end of the season, then we'll try and announce a closure. But it just has gotten a little tricky over the last couple of years to say we're open this date until that date. Sometimes we've extended it, and sometimes we've cut it short. So we're just going to let it run, and then we'll let you know when we're about to run out of pounds. So I think it's going to be a pretty good season.
Yes, sir. I think people are going to like the 4-day weekend deal. I think that's going to open up a lot of opportunities. Like you said, last year was so weird with COVID and just the insane amount of numbers of people fishing. It's going to be interesting to see how it goes this year.
Yeah, we still consider it a safe and healthy activity, and that's what we did last year. So I think the effort may level out a little bit because this year travel baseball and softball and soccer is back in. Disney is letting people come back and visit. We can go back to grandma's house now because people are receiving their immunizations. So I think you'll see it level out a little bit. We added the Monday to give people an opportunity that if they're traveling here on vacation, that you get a 2 weekdays. You get a Friday and a Monday. And some people who live local will choose not to go on a Saturday or something when the effort's generally pretty high. They can go on a Monday, and the effort has been about a third of like a Saturday. So that makes it a good kind of a relaxing opportunity for people that can during the week.
All right, Mr. Scott. Amberjack's coming open pretty soon, correct?
It is. It's going to open May 1st through 31st. National Marine Fishery Service just announced that. And then we, in Alabama, we follow those same dates for all the other reef fish. So, gray triggerfish has been open, and the weather's been a little crazy for people to get out and do that. It's been a little breezy and been a little tough, but on the days that people can go, I've seen some pictures on social media, some fantastic triggers. And,
oh, yeah.
So the amberjack opening in May. So the last weekend in May, you are likely to be able to fish for amberjack, triggerfish, and red snapper all at the same time. And we haven't had that many opportunities to do that. So I think people will be excited. And I do want to remind folks that we did make amberjack and triggerfish mandatory in the red snapper reporting system this year, snapper check. And I know some people feel that maybe the snapper check numbers were being used against them because of some people have heard about the calibration concern where they wanted to reduce our season by half. But I just want to assure folks that we use those numbers to show what really goes on here in Alabama. We monitor artificial reef zone. We have tremendous data. We know what the exploitation rate or the fishing rate is out there, and our snapper check numbers line up with that very well. So we know what's coming off of there. We actually use that to defend our stance of why we should be able to fish at this level, that it's sustainable. And I want to move forward with a little bit different management plan as we move forward to divide up the red snapper a little bit different. And snapper check is how we help with that. So triggerfish and amberjack are two valuable species here to anglers in Alabama. And I have some concerns with how some of those numbers are going. So we want to use that to validate the data that we already get through the University of South Alabama and the Dauphin Island Sea Lab, Dr. Powers' crew that gives us that assessment. And so he says, here's how many fish are leaving the reef. And so we can use our data to say, yes, we agree. And this is a sustainable level. So don't look at it as we're trying to penalize you. We are using these numbers to try and help the fisheries for anglers in Alabama.
Well, and I think I think you guys have proven that with snapper check. So, I mean, I think like last year, for instance, I mean, people were, reporting their catches on snapper check, and that's why the days kept getting, or you kept getting more and more snapper days. I mean, you were looking at it in real time data. So you're able to not necessarily manipulate, but figure out those numbers in real time.
Right. We do. And that's the advantage, of a state managed system. And, we were about to go to a 0-day federal season, and I don't know how we would have gotten out of that. The way that the feds were determining the numbers, they were going to say that we're not going to be able to fish in federal waters. And that would have been a very, very challenging process to get out of. So we went to state management. There is some disagreement on the pounds that were allocated. They issue the pounds to us using their federal system, and then we account for them using snapper check, which is a little bit different system. So they call that currency, that we have to take our Alabama currency and change it back into the federal currency. And that's where there's been this discussion of calibration and reducing our number of pounds. But last week at the Gulf of Mexico Fishery Management Council meeting, the council voted not to implement that calibration, so that we're going to fish at the same level that we had been fishing. And I know that there's a lot of talk about the great red snapper count, which is an amazing snapshot of the Gulf of Mexico for red snapper. And it was done by over 20 of the best scientists in the Gulf of Mexico that these guys, they know what they're doing. And they developed some new techniques and created a report that conservatively says there's 3 times more red snapper. And now, you can't just go out and say we're going to fish at a rate 3 times higher. It doesn't work that way. But we want to factor that information into the stock assessments. And the Science and Statistical Committee, we didn't feel really took in all of that information. They're the ones that make a recommendation to the Gulf Council about our fishing limits. And so that's why you're not seeing a big bump up, because they only bumped up the allowable biological catch, what we call the ABC level. They only raised it 300,000 pounds, and that's between commercial, for hire, and private angler. So when you then divide that up between the 5 Gulf states based on our percentages, it's a negligible bump. But we're happy to be fishing at the level we are going to this year, which is around 1 million pounds. It's a relatively good season for us, and so we kind of get a 2-year reprieve waiting on some a future stock assessment, which we hope incorporates some more studies, including the great red snapper count. So we still have a long road ahead of us, but I assure you that my staff and the Commissioner Chris Blankenship, and even our congressional staff, Congressman Carl, Senator Shelby's staff, have been very supportive, and we're working to ensure that we keep a very viable fishery here in Alabama.
Yes, sir. And you guys are doing a great job. I know you listen to the public comments, and we truly believe that you guys have our best interests at heart. So we appreciate all the hard work and the beatings you guys take for us. We know what it takes. So we appreciate you guys. And as always, it's great to have you on the show. And we'll look forward to hearing from you next time. Hopefully we can get out there and catch some of those snapper.
I hope so, guys, and post your pictures. And as always, thank you for the opportunity to share the information with the public, and I'm available anytime.
All right. It's always good to hear from Director Bannon. Be interesting to see what the red snapper count does this year with COVID kind of slacking off. And I don't know, maybe we'll see if the people that got super mad at the snapper early last year because of the COVID thing continue to harvest red snapper. let's head on down to, well, I say down, but let's head offshore, man. Let's see what Captain Richard Rutland's up doing with cold-blooded fishing. What you say, Cap?
Oh, shoot, man. Just waiting on you.
Heck yeah. Story of your life, right? Waiting to give it a report.
Sounds like y'all just got done talking to Director Bannon. I'm sure he be interested to see what he had to say in the first part of the report.
Yep.
Good news for the recreational angler.
Yep, for sure.
Coming along here. We
didn't lose anything. I don't think, so that's good.
Yep, it's going to change things for us for rodeo this year. We might actually have red snapper in this year. You know, we're kind of almost got to a point where almost gotten to a point where we're going to count it out. But
put it
maybe,
on chopping
maybe
block.
It's back in. Yep, we might have to call Director Bannon and see what he's got to say. See if he's going to hold some pounds for us.
Pounds for us. Yeah. Hey, you got to think about that, man. That's a lot of people fishing that weekend.
I know. Well, I mean, from 2 years ago to last year, we were really thinking we were going to get snapper in again. And of course, what you were just saying about the COVID craze, nobody doing anything, quarantine, people having to work from home, had all this free time. They got to go fishing,
Hopefully the last weekend of May, it'd be awesome if we could get jacks and trigger snapper.
Fish and snapper. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, tell us about it, man. You popped your swordfish cherry. I'm gonna go ahead and
say it. Yep.
Congrats to you. First of all, man, that's awesome, man. You guys. Tell us about it, man. I ain't gonna steal your thunder. Run us through it.
Man, we had a pretty awesome trip. I had kind of a choice whether to go on Monday or Wednesday. I'm glad I went on Monday because the weather today is pretty sporty out there, but we knew it was going to be rough in the morning. It's forecast to blow about 20 knots out of the north till about noon, and that's about exactly what it did. It was blow 20 knots the whole time. And I tell you what, I can't talk good enough about the vessel I bought, that Ocean Master. Absolutely, I felt completely safe in it the whole time. Didn't get our brains beat out. That boat rides and performs really well. And I tell you, when we stopped and started fishing, it really didn't feel like it was near as rough as it was. The boat, it drifts really well. It's great for sword fishing because it keeps the rod tip nice and
true. Yes.
The rod tip's not bouncing around the whole time on the drift. It just it stayed nice and loaded up the entire time. You weren't guessing whether you had a bite or not. Every bite we got, we saw, and except for the second one, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But
yeah, for sure.
We were using bonita strips, rig bonita strips. I did a bunch of video watching and talking to some folks, and rigged all my own baits. So that was kind of neat, and had them frozen, ready to go.
You using skirts or anything on those strips?
Yep. Purple was the color we got all our bites on the other day. We only used 2 baits. The first one was kind of funny, man. The first fish we caught was a pup. Like he was probably only maybe jaw length, only like 38, 39 inches long, wasn't anywhere near being a legal fish. Mm-hmm. And I kind of thought it was funny, that of course the first one I'm going to catch on my boat is going to be a little guy, but the second one was a giant. We didn't get a weight on him, but it was probably in the 170 to 190 pound class. So
definitely it was a solid fish. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe since your first swordfish you got was a pup, maybe you should name it the SS Pup. Need to think about that. Let's think about that. I like it. I like something about pup because it's a big, heavy boat. You can call it the pup.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's awesome, man. Y'all are doing the drift kind of the same 1,500 foot range.
We were more in about 11 to 1,300 was kind of where we're getting the most activity at.
Were y'all seeing the bait on the meter or what were you targeting?
No, didn't see anything on the meter.
Just going strictly on numbers.
Yeah. Well, I've got one of those Seymour maps on the boat that kind of show you these depressions offshore. Basically, I mean, it's kind of neat when you look at the bathymetric view of the bottom. It looks like it's like mountain valleys out there. You know what I mean? It's just a big valley that got cut. But you can tell it got cut by some water at one point or another. The sea level was definitely much lower than whenever that got formed. But I was really concentrating on the edges of this ditch that we were fishing out there, and making, about 1 to 2.5 mile drifts or so. We were moving pretty fast because of the wind. We were kind of in between about 1.5 to 2.5 knots was the drift. So I went up in weight size. My stay weight, I went with the 5-pound weight instead of a 3. You obviously want to use the lightest means necessary to keep your bait down there so you can see a bite much better. But so I went a little bit heavier because I knew that. And you could tell the line was probably could have even put a little bit more because the line was stretched out kind of behind the boat just a little bit.
How long is it taking you to make a drift like that? You said about 2 miles.
Yeah, about 30, 40 minutes, something like that. Really, we only dropped 5 times and caught 3 fish, and one of the drops you can't even really count because you always learn something new every time you go. I put we were using these old valve handles that a buddy of mine gave me for our sacrificial weights. They're just these iron big valve handles, and there's 2 different sizes. When we were using the big ones.
Yeah.
And then I had a couple small ones, and we put one small one on there. And I think what happened was my stay weight fell quicker than my sacrificial weight. And we wound up like a great big, a great big tangle, and got the tangle out and dropped. And then our next drop was our big fish. It was pretty cool. So just anybody who's listening, make sure that your sacrificial weight is heavier than your stay weight.
Yeah, makes sense.
Because that will create a tangle for sure.
Anything else you? I know we didn't decide necessarily what you were going to give for a tip, but anything else you learned?
The only thing I've done it several times, gone out there several times trying to catch one. One thing I did was I moved my light a little bit closer to the bait than I was previously. I was running my first light about probably 15 to 20 feet up the line, and I moved it up much closer to the swivel. I want to say I was probably fishing at about probably 8 feet from the bait. I have about a 6-foot bite leader, 300-pound bite leader. That's about 6 foot to a swivel. And then I put it about another 3 or 4 feet above that was where I put my first light. Before that, I was fishing my light much farther up. I don't know if that was a difference or not for me, but it definitely works.
Got some results. Yeah. Heck yeah.
Hey, so I got a question for you. We do a lot of rigging at the shop for swordfish, and I'm kind of in between Mark and Chris, and both of them swordfish a lot, especially Chris. People buy wind-ons all the time, and we'll put them on their 50s and 80s and all that stuff for swordfish. And the ones you buy prepackaged are 150 feet, and a lot, Chris likes a whole 150-foot wind on, and then Mark will do a 75. He'll make me walk it out. We'll cut it in half. Is there a preference on your end? I know everybody has different things, and there's different reasons for everything they do. Is there anything that you prefer so far?
So I don't use wind. Well, I mean, I guess I do use a wind on, but I make my own. I use 130-pound mono to my braid, and I do like a
top shot, right?
A top shot. I'm basically, I'm making my own top shot, and I do mine 150 feet, and then I've got my I floss in my loop for my weight about 75 feet from the bait. A lot of people think a lot of different ways about where to put that stay weight. If you want to put it like 50 or 75 feet, or some people want to go 100, 150 feet. I feel like the closer you have the weight to the bait, the better you're going to be able to detect the bite, because you don't have so much slack in your line. You got to figure you've got your weight hanging down there, and then you've got 75 or 100 foot of line out there, where you're making this drift. It's going to be, the farther away the weight is, I think it's going to be better, harder to see the bite.
I think that makes a lot of sense, though, as far as seeing the bite. I was just thinking as far as getting the lead as far away from the fish as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how I did it. And I actually, between the last time I tried and this time, I moved my weight down some.
Closer to the bait?
Closer to the bait, yeah. I was probably more at about 100 foot from the bait, and I moved it down closer to right at 75 feet. I kind of measured it out, pulling out lengths of line. But that's how, Dustin, to answer your question, that's my that's what I'm doing. Is I make my own top shot. I'd rather do it that way than screw it the loop to loop. The one advantage I can see to having the wind on and doing a loop to loop. Like when I dropped and reeled up a mess, if I couldn't have got that untangled, it was just lucky I had another rod, another rod with one on there. If you only got one reel, and you reel up a mess and your top shot, and you don't have, I didn't bring my spool line with me to make another top shot while I was out there. I could have easily done that. That would have been the advantage to having a wind on and being able just to change it right out and drop right back down.
Yeah, absolutely.
What pound test do most of your folks over there prefer?
I think a lot of those are 150 to 200. It'll vary, but I think it's it's R&R tackle. I'm pretty sure. I think they're 200 pounds, 150 feet. But I was going to go back to the weight thing real quick. You're talking about the distance from your weight to the bait. You would think a shorter distance would control that depth a little better on where your bait's at. Because if you got 75 feet behind that weight, or let's say 75 or 100 behind that bait, that bait's you would think it would rise and want to stay higher up. And, so if you're trying to get an exact depth, I would think the closer the better, because it's going to get you within that shorter range of that depth you're trying to be at.
Yeah, I think you're going to get better action too. And we're going to talk about some of that in a second when we get into the tip section.
Yep, for sure. I agree with all of that for sure.
I tell you the kind of the what I was not expecting was on our bigger fish, really all the fish we caught, none of them fought that hard. The big one that we caught, we literally from the time we loaded up the rod tip and started reeling her in to the time that I stuck the harpoon in her was like, I didn't have an exact time, but couldn't have been more than 20 or 25 minutes long. I mean, like, got the fish right up, got the weight off. She jumped one time, got her up next to the boat, and I sank it, and it was over. I got some bill rash on my boat, man. Nice. She was going nuts next to the boat. Right. Got all these big scratches on the side of the boat. I'm all pumped about that. That's cool.
The cold-blooded pup. The naughty pup, Knotty, the naughty pup. I'm gonna come up with one of these one day.
All right, something will sink.
That's right. Well, man, that's awesome, dude. Congratulations again. We got to get a tip from you before we let you go. What you think for an offshore tip this week?
One thing that I learned when we went with Adam over in Destin, with Adam Peoples over there. He liked to move that bait around a lot, and that's what I did. That's what I've been doing every time I've been going. And kind of, Dusty, what you're talking about a second ago about the shorter distance from the weight to the bait, getting it to move and have action and whatnot. I think when you are moving the bait around, and what I'm talking about when we're moving the bait around, like almost what I've been doing is like when I get my sacrificial weight off, I usually drop my stay weight back down, find the bottom, and then get up off the bottom 25, 50 feet, something like that. And then I don't let it sit for more than 5 minutes. I'll let it sit at a depth for about 5, 6, 7 minutes. And I'll reel it up 50 feet. And then I'll let it sit there for a little while, reel it up another 50 feet. And whatever you feel like doing, I just think it doesn't really matter.
Man. I agree. I like that, how Adam fished too. I like that he liked action. And I'm sure there's some action down there on its own, depending on current and weight, wave height up top, but golly, more action's gotta help. I mean, drop down, reel up real hard, real slow sometimes. I think that helps a lot.
One thing I was really thinking about up there is every time I was ready to drop the bait back down, I would wind it up first before I dropped it down, just to make sure you don't have a bite or something like that. I'd wind it up, wait about 30 seconds, watch the rod tip, nothing happened, then I'd drop it all the way back down. And that's what I would do, is like 30 to 50 foot increments, up and down. I don't think I was getting farther than 200 foot off the bottom, probably, even if that. Everything was pretty close to the bottom for us the other day.
Something else to think about too, when you talk about reeling first, I think that's awesome, just because with a lot of fish, whether it be a largemouth or a redfish or whatever, but if you have a fish that's tailing your bait and just following it, looking at it, sometimes that quick burst of movement is enough to make that reaction
trigger a bite. 100%.
Yep. And that's my mindset. When I see anything on the rod tip, I'm taking it away from them and going to let it sit, see any more activity, drop it back down to them, let them eat it, and then wind up and get tight. But our third fish on Monday, I saw some activity on the rod tip, and I just went over there and started reeling it like I was going to move it, and the rod tip loaded up. That's a really good feeling, by the way,
Heck
guys.
yeah.
I'm going to tell you what, dude, you see that rod tip move and go and reel, and that rod tip loads up.
Yep.
Yep.
Home.
And that was something else too, setting the hook when you get a bite. Whenever I saw that rod tip load up, I went full drag.
Yep.
And I wound down as tight. I was even pulling the line down into the reel to get that rod to bend to look. That's the only way you're setting the hook.
Hub that hook. Yeah, that's a long way down there, man. I was just thinking, whenever you're talking about moving it, I'm like, man, I bet that bait doesn't move near as much as you think it does.
No,
you know what I mean? You're reeling your face off 15 times. I bet that bait doesn't move near as much as you think it does.
Because it's so stretched out,
right. Yep.
Behind the weight.
Yep, and I'm sure it's even more exaggerated than you think.
Yep. One other part to my tip too about moving the bait on our second fish, our big one that we caught. We dropped down, sacrificial hit the bottom, like the line went limp, and we went to go pick it up, and the rod tip loaded up like the stay weight had not come off, like the sacrificial weight had not come off.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like dropping it back down, reeling it up, dropping it back down, trying to get it to unhook. I mean, it should have unhooked no problem whatsoever the way I had it rigged. Anyway, I started to notice when I was dropping it back down, it wasn't going back down at the bottom. It was not dropping back down as far as I'd been reeling it up. And now I figured out we had a fish. So, so just part of the tip, I would say, when that weight hits the bottom and you reel up, man, you better be ready, because that fish had to have eaten it as soon as it hit the bottom. Boom, he ate it.
Dropped it right in his mouth.
Pretty much what I felt like. You hear like a crystal.
That's how it happened that day on your fish. As soon as that bait hit the bottom, I think it was our first or maybe second drift.
Second drop.
He was on.
You hear like Crystal with Sea Lab, like running all her video and stuff like that. I guess Captain Kurt was doing a seminar the other day, and I heard him say it, but they always talk about like bottom fishing for snapper, grouper, triggerfish, stuff like that, man. As soon as that weight hits the bottom, that 2-hook rig or whatever, a lot of times, boom, you get bit like immediately. And I don't know if it's like the weight hitting the bottom and the fish like can feel that or see it and come on into it and then see something and eat it. I don't know. It's probably the same thing. I mean, it just feels like
something different, some activity down there of some sort.
Sword fishing really to me kind of just feels like big boy bottom fishing, basically, for daytime stuff, but definitely an art to it.
Hey, Richard, I was going to ask you, and this may be something I tend to overthink a lot of things and make them more technical than they need to be. But, so as far as leader material goes, everybody's using mono, of course, and different brands, whether it be Suffix or Andy or whatever you may use, have more stretch than others. Are you wanting more stretch? Are you wanting less stretch? Is there any particular one that works better for you that's going to give you ideally what you're looking for in that leader material?
So the Top Shot, I'm using 130, 150 feet of it, which I feel like that's going to give you a fair amount of stretch right there. I do like some stretch in my line, especially when you're fighting a big fish. And a swordfish is going to shake their head a whole bunch and jump in the whole 9 yards. My leader material, I'm using that Mamoy hard. It's called Mamoy hard something. I can't remember, but it's a little bit harder, and you can tell it's stiffer than regular mono. I've seen a lot of people sit there arguing back and forth on the internet about, whether you need to use fluorocarbon or not. Man, there's no way you need to use fluorocarbon in 1,300 foot of water.
I wouldn't think so.
I read, I just kind of getting into this, you start reading on the internet, and I read about light penetration, and everything I read about light penetration was that in the water, light will not penetrate farther than, I think it's 682 feet is what I read, so you're fishing twice that basically in this, all those fish are seeing is that light and the bait.
And another thing too, is like, okay, it may penetrate. How bright is it at 682 feet?
It can't be much.
No,
can't be much.
That's if it's super, super clear water, like blue water. I mean, imagine like fishing up close. We got some dirty water on the surface. It can't go that deep, there's no way.
Agreed.
That's right.
I mean, you're talking sword fishing at night, or me and Dusty were a minute ago, and you're you're 80 or 120 miles out in crystal clear blue, what I call, Mexico water. Basically, you're out there that far, and you got those super bright lights on, and it's pitch black. I mean, there's no lights anywhere. And I think the further down, the farthest down I've ever seen those giant lights are probably 150 feet. Just something to think about,
Something I remember Angelo Depaola talking about was, like as far as the nighttime thing goes, like no moon, fish the baits closer to the surface. Big moon, light penetrates down much farther. You can fish them all the way down to, I want to say he was telling us 400 to 600 feet deep
sure.
on some of those when you're nighttime and whatnot. You want to have, it makes sense when you think about it, about as far as the light penetration goes, you have a big full moon.
Agreed.
Or
something.
Anybody's ever tried to drop down some of those underwater LED lights, the long bars and
the crazy bright ones? That would be quite a project. You have to have some serious.
You would think it'd pull one up though. I mean, just like a crappie or trout or anything going to a dock light.
Have like a daggum hose reel with a couple hundred feet of
infrastructure is a word I was looking for. Like the ROV that the Sea Lab uses. You'd have to have a big wheel or something.
Just far enough where you can still see the light and see what's swimming in it. Man, that would be
crazy.
Dock light to the next level.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I remember decade, then we had those big hydro glow lights, I guess they're 4 foot or whatever, 4.5 foot, and we'd always plug them in, run it up the outrigger, and you drop it down as far as you could, as far as the cord would allow, 25 or 50 feet or whatever it was, and it would definitely make a difference, man. I mean, it would bring up a whole ecosystem, it would bring up all the plankton and all the minnows and everything you could catch. I mean, you bring up tuna sometimes, you drift into a school of tuna at night too.
Yep, there was a ton of life offshore when we were out there the other day. There was a bunch of grass around. We didn't see any big mats pushed together. It was all spread out. Of course, it was rough too, so that's probably why.
All busted up.
Yeah, but there was flying fish all over the place. What's that?
How about the cobia?
Oh yeah, we kind of forgot about that. Went and got on the beach yesterday on Tuesday. Had very great weather. In the morning time, it was a little cloudy. It took a little while for the clouds to get out of there. Once the clouds got out of there, it was beautiful. But we pretty much slow trolled all the way from Flora, Bama, all the way to Fort Morgan, and did all of Dixie Bar, and hit a bunch of buoys and everything. And might have seen one fish. Didn't get a real good look at it. Kind of non-existent. A lot of life on the beach. Bait balls, birds diving, turtles everywhere, saw blackfish while we were eating all. I mean, let's say blackfish, it was like 12 inches long, but
there was redfish and jacks everywhere yesterday. It seemed like from the pier all the way to Dixie Bar was just loaded up. I know Chris got into a bunch on the fly yesterday off of Fort Morgan, and saw, Mathew caught some off the pier yesterday, jacks and redfish. So.
Yep. Dixie Bar is absolutely still on fire right now. There's some giant schools of fish out there. It's been a lot of fun. I mean, a really, really good year for bull reds, which is good to see. I was really worried about them last year because it was almost non-existent last year.
I remember you talked about last year how tough it was. So we need to go out to the flower rods one day and get after them.
Heck, be fun, man. I've never done much fly stuff.
I saw Captain Mike out there yesterday, and
he's been loving it, man.
He has been wearing those fish out. I mean, he's been out there like 3 or 4 days in a row. Like every day he can go, he's been going.
That's good.
And oh yeah, for sure. He's living that good retired life now.
Yep, hope so.
And then I saw Chris out there on the fly rod. I didn't know it was Chris at the time till this morning when I saw his pictures, but I recognized his wife on the picture or whatever, and I shot him a message. Man, I didn't know that was you.
Yeah.
And it's been unbelievable. But
I look forward to it. We're gonna hear from Chris here in a minute, so looking forward to getting that report for sure.
Oh, sweet. Yep. Well, man, I tell you, things are starting to look up. The water's still pretty dirty down around the mouth of the bay and whatnot. I guess we're going to get a little bit of a cold shot here tonight, and we're going to chill it off a little bit.
Yep.
The old Berry steam plant starting to come down. I haven't checked it in a couple of days. I'm sure it's probably down around like 8 or probably less than 8 feet right now. So the bottom end of the bay should start to clean up, and speckled trout fish should probably start to really get on fire here before we know it. So I'm looking forward to that. I got a lot of trips booked.
Good deal, man. Well, if folks want to get up with you and book an inshore or an offshore trip, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Man, coldbloodedfishing.com. Get on there. You can find my telephone number on there. Give me a call, give me a text, shoot me an email. We'll get you booked up. Got only just a handful of trips for available for inshore through the end of June. Still got plenty of availability in July, and offshore boat. I got lots of availability with offshore boat right now. So hopefully this weather's going to settle out and we'll kind of get into a little bit better pattern here, and that's going to really start to change things as far as being able to get out a bunch.
For sure, man. God, the weather's got to get better. I feel like it's been blowing for.
It's been a bad year so far,
gracious,
man. It's like the worst winter I could remember, man. It's just
we should
unbelievable.
I met Chad Foster over here, Foster Contracting, one of our sponsors. He's put a new roof on my house. We were talking earlier, man. There ought to be plenty of dang flowers in May from all the April showers, right? Ain't that what they say?
Yeah.
Good Lord.
I had when we went to go get on the boat the other day, I had a 5-gallon bucket in the boat that was empty when I left it there. And in 4 days, it was like this far. It was probably overflowing, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Some evaporated out of it. But, man, that down at Dolphin Island, thinking about that, golly, it's a lot of rain.
It's a lot of water. It's got to go somewhere, man, like you say.
All right, my man. Well, I appreciate you having me on.
Enjoyed it.
I'll see you soon.
Talk to you next time, Cap. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
All right, folks, let's take a quick break and hear from one of this week's sponsors. That's an awesome fishing report from Captain Richard Rutland. The Flora Bama Fishing Rodeo is an annual fishing tournament held at Flora Bama Old River Grill. It's coined the Gulf Coast's funnest fishing tournament. This rodeo is fun for all ages. From kids to adults, there are more than 30 categories of fish, additional competitive divisions, low entry fees, and tons of prizes. Fishing Rodeo focuses on bringing families together for a fun weekend of fishing on the Gulf Coast. This will be June 11th and 12th, 2021. And also brought to you by KillerDock. As anglers, we put a lot of time, money, and passion into fishing, but most of us do not have a fish cleaning station that we are proud of. Many of us are suffering from dock dysfunction. A rotten table with rusty metal, this is just no good. But the dock enhancement that we've all been waiting for is finally here. KillerDock uses marine-grade aluminum to make fabulous fish cleaning tables and stunning canopies that will keep us out of the sun. KillerDock combines durability, function, and design to uniquely upgrade your entire dock experience. Visit KillerDock.com to see more. All right, man. Let's get a. I don't even know what to call him anymore. Let's get a bum report. Let's just go with bum. Richard did say to say, tell Ultimate I said, what's up? So let's go see what the Ultimate Beach Bum's doing. What you say, Cap?
I'm doing good, man. It's good to be back on the show.
Yeah,
and
man,
you're absolutely right. You know, I'm all over the place. Kayak, piers, boats. You know, who the heck knows? I'm just wherever.
Saw some big old goldfish you caught yesterday. That was pretty, man.
Yeah, it was pretty intense. You know, I've never been a part of a redfish run like that. Like, I've never been in the middle of them just going off. Because I've spent so much time on the beach, I haven't really chased them in a boat or a kayak or been on the pier as much as I have lately. And that was pretty intense. It was pretty epic. I was
pretty special.
Freaking out a little bit. It is. It was really cool.
Yeah. It'll make you realize exactly what a redfish will eat, and that would be anything that's in front of them.
Anything. Yep.
Anything, yes. They were choking anything.
So if they could eat each other, they would.
No doubt, dude. So y'all were on the Gulf State Park Pier, right, Matt?
That's right. And, you know, it's still not completely finished. It's still got a large section missing, but we were fortunate that some of those schools did come in close enough that we could reach them.
So y'all just were looking for schools and throwing what at them?
Most of the guys out there on the pier, they're throwing cobia jigs. I've just been throwing like X-wraps and spoons, and just to try to get a little extra distance out of that. And I'm using one of my surf casting rods, so I can fling a bait pretty far, and it's actually come in handy because there's been times that those schools show up and I can get that first cast on them before anybody else does. So that it does give you a little bit of an advantage from the cobia jigs and the shorter rods that most people have out there. So it's helped me out a little bit.
And what is the pier etiquette on that? So you see a school of reds coming, you see them first, you're ready to cast on them. What do you do? What's the etiquette? I know different piers have different etiquettes, right?
Yeah, and I'm fairly new to pier fishing. I haven't done a ton of it, so I'm not going to say like I'm a pier etiquette expert. But most of the guys that I've fished with are all pretty cool, and we're kind of all chasing the same thing. And honestly, like when these schools of reds and jacks have come, we've there's so much less room too because of how the pier is right now, because there's no octagon and all that. Whereas if it was the full pier, you'd probably have a little more space. So I think people are just a little bit more understanding, and we pretty much just cast over each other and hope for the best.
Right.
and nobody's really gotten bad at each other. I mean, we kind of all know how it is. I mean, we do our best, the best that we can.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well,
it seems that the, when it's like redfish and jacks and stuff, it's pretty much just all hands on deck because I had my pier rat phase back in high school, and I was out there just about every day. And it seemed like, April, May, there's always big schools of drum or jacks or reds. And, they'd come in and crash all those LYs right at the end of the pier. And, it seemed like everybody kind of kept, was respectful. And then you had people that, weren't necessarily trying to be disrespectful, but
didn't know.
Inexperienced. Yeah. But, it seemed like everybody just cast in there, hook up. And honestly, half the time, half the people would tangle up. So it would kind of narrow down the field and,
right.
7 or 8
weed out
the. Yeah, 7 or 8 people ran fish. A lot of people wouldn't. But I think really the only thing that it seemed to be like on, hey, who's casting first would be more of like the cobia thing, and guys will call their shot. If you see the fish, you call it, say, hey, first shot, and then go on from there. And then if you swing and miss, or miss it by a mile, then whoever's second in line is landing that jig right behind them. So I think that's really the main thing on, you see a fish, it's more the cobia side of things where guys were a little more iffy on who's casting first and when. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I've never really done any pier fishing at all. I know those guys crush fish on the Cedar Point Pier. That would be my closest venue. I think they're getting rebuilt back from Sally pretty good. They've been fishing some, I believe. What else you been up to, Bama Beach Bum? You been doing any Pompano fishing? I know Pompano's pretty hot right now.
Yeah, I've done a little bit, and I'm running less trips, or actually cutting them out altogether. But I've had a few that I had on the books that I told folks I would still run, that I had on the books before I made that decision to stop. And we've had some good days, we've had some bad days. It's just this time of year you can overcome a lot of things, but sometimes you still just get those days that it's pretty dang slow. But like yesterday, we had a hard time yesterday morning. I'm not sure what really threw them off, but we couldn't find them, and there were several people on the beach. Nobody was catching them. Whereas like leading up to it the last few days, we've been catching them fine on that same beach. And it just, you get out there one day and something's off, and they don't like it. They can still be caught. You just got to put a little more effort into it, but it just depends on where and when and all that. I will say they have been, from my experience on the beaches that I've fished, they have all been pretty deep for the most part still. Haven't really caught any pompano real close to the beach. Most everything I'm having to get pretty far out there. And I'm surprised that I'm seeing it does seem to, they really are favoring these rips a lot, which is pretty common. We talk about that a lot, that they're hanging in these rips and all. But I've noticed that if I'm not in those rips, I'm not having nearly as much success on those trips or on those days. Whereas typically this time of year, I'm seeing like, you can catch pompano anywhere. And if you look at social media, you would think that would be the case. But honestly, they're really hanging tight to these riffs and they're pretty far out, so from my personal experience anyway. So kind of interesting just seeing that kind of pattern, despite the fact that it looks like we've had just an incredible run this year from all the pictures and from all the people out there fishing. I would have thought that you'd see a little bit more widespread. I don't know if everybody caught them before they got to our beaches or or what, but they don't seem to be as just everywhere as I have seen in the past.
What do you think, Dusty?
I agree completely. And it seems like as far as numbers go, like higher numbers further west, Mobile Street, Fort Morgan is seeing like those 20, 30 fish days, especially if your name's Bun.
Bun's been smashing them.
Bun's always absolutely mashing them. But there's a lot of other guys out there too that are catching those bigger numbers to the west. It seems like, it's like hit or miss. It's like you catch fewer fish but better quality, and vice versa. That first weekend of the Pomp Stomp, we had a lot of big fish because we were on that full moon phase, and we got another one coming up next week. So I think that the size factor is going to start coming back up. Majority of the fish we've seen weighed in the past couple of weeks have been in that 1 to 2.5 pound range. And, it's all those schoolie fish and all those males. I think so. I think that size will kind of come back. But no, I agree 100% with the rip part. I've actually kind of hit a pompano sloop, and I usually do every year. It's like everybody else is catching them, and I can't catch one to save my life. But those rips are definitely where we are getting bites, whether it be pompano, whiting, redfish, whatever. And that's key. And, you know, a few guys, including Bun, that's what they're doing. They're looking for those rips, and they're moving. You fish one, and, you know, it may look as good as it can get, but if they're not there, they're not there. And you got to pick up, move down to the next one. And it seems like the guys that are, I don't want to say it in a rude way, but the guys that aren't lazy and are moving and covering ground and you know, walking, you know, a mile or two and fishing rip after rip after rip are the ones that are catching a lot of fish. If you're setting up and holding tight to a spot and like, man, this looks good, I don't want to leave. If they're not there, they're not there.
Right. It's got to limit your chances for sure.
Yep. And those fish are coming down the beach in schools, you know, with pompano. Like, you can sit out there for 2 hours, not get a bite, and then limit out in 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. But there's almost always going to be, especially to the east in that cleaner water this time of year, there's schools coming down nonstop. And if you're not getting bites within a couple of hours, you know, you might want to move down to a different area, because there might be something that's more ideal in that next rip or 2 or 3 rips down, whether it be a bait or whether it's, you know, water temperature or whatever it may be, water clarity even. And I've noticed a lot of tide lines with all this rain. You get a lot of tide lines all over the place. And there was a day last week where this rip was kind of moving down. We had a good tide line, and I was right. As far as a surf structure goes, a sandbar, it looked absolutely perfect. But there was this dude heaving this 15-foot rod into the green water that I couldn't get to, and he was catching a pompano every cast all morning. And he was, you know, just hitting right in this little eddy swirl that had green water, and we were fishing dirtier water and catching catfish and whiting, and he was catching pompano just because he was, and I don't think he knew where he was throwing, you know, purposely, but he was doing it and he was catching fish. So keep an eye out for that stuff. And if you're not catching fish, you have the option to move.
Yep, for sure. Well, what else you been up to, Bama Beach Bum? Been doing some kayaks, some speckled trout fishing, anything like that?
You know, I haven't been on my kayak in probably about a month. I've been, you know, once the temperatures warmed up, I've been doing a lot more beach and pier fishing. And I have been chasing some stripers. You know, that's out of town. I've been doing some of that with a buddy of mine. I did some turkey hunting. You know, my only complaint about spring is there's just way too much stuff to do. Like, everything just starts going off. You got bass fishing, stripe fishing, pompano fishing, speckled trout fishing. Jacks show up, which jacks are my favorite dadgum fish. Turkey hunting, which I've never done it until this year, but obviously it's in springtime, so there's just too much to do. Like, we've been so busy just trying to get a little bit of something. I know.
That's our ecosystem, man. That's where we live. We live in an awesome place. We talk about that all the time, man. You can do so much here. It's fun for sure.
The thing about turkey hunting, you can do it in the morning and then fish midday and go back in the woods.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm right there with you. I was looking at my kayak because I'm not going to tell you where I keep it because I don't want to get the location up. But anyways, I was looking at my kayak yesterday. I was like, man, I have not been on my kayak since me and Chris and Hayes went to Wausau, which was like the end of February. And I was like, October through February, I'm on it. I mean, every single day almost, if not 4 or 5 days a week, I'm on my kayak going somewhere, fishing the rivers and the creeks and all this stuff. And it's like, I've been on there a month and a half just because as it gets warmer, the opportunities spread out. You know, you start surf fishing more and getting on the boat more and all this stuff. And there's still plenty of things to do in the kayak. No, I'm right there with you. It's like springtime. It's like you hit a wall. There's so much to do and you're not worried about the kayak. And then once it gets back in the summertime, that's when I start getting back on it and kind of exploring a little more and getting in these backwaters and rivers and stuff. But it's crazy how, you know, you go through phases. It's like one day the kayak doesn't leave the back of your truck and then all of a sudden it hadn't been back there in a month and a half.
Yep. I understand, man. That's a great report, Mathew Isbell. If folks want to follow you on YouTube to get all the wisdom out of your brain and let you know that you need a haircut, what's the best way to follow you, buddy?
Yes, if you have any fashion tips, I'm always looking for that on my YouTube channel. But
I thought that was hilarious last week, dude. There was like 10 comments. Hey, buddy, cut your hair. I was cracking up.
You know, and the thing about it, I really, and hopefully this doesn't offend anybody, but these are typically grown men commenting on my fashion appearance. I never had a clue that men were so concerned with my appearances. But you get all kinds of crazy comments about your hair and
Hey man,
teeth and your beard, and
I always say if you ain't got haters, you ain't doing it right.
that's right. That's right. That's the truth. But yeah, Bama Beach Bum. If you just search it on YouTube, you'll find plenty of videos. You can find me on there.
Awesome, buddy. Well, glad to have you back on, and we look forward to having you back on next time, buddy. Take care. Keep us up to date on what you're up to.
Yeah, I will do it. We'll do a check-in every so often, just see where I'm at.
All right, guys, that wraps up another great segment. You guys check out our great sponsors while we take a break. That segment was brought to us by Foster Contracting, Fortified Roofing Pros. Often when a business is small, you miss the professionalism you get with larger companies. That's not the case with Fortified Roofing Pros. They're a family-owned business that is big enough to get the job done, but small enough to care. If you're looking for quality construction with a dependable, licensed, and certified fortified roofing professional, give the Fortified Roofing Pros a call at 251-973-9999. Remember to support the local businesses that make your local podcast possible, and check them out at fortifiedroofingpros.com. All right, Captain Dusty, let's head on down to Sam's Bait and Tackle in Orange Beach, Alabama. Let's talk to your co-worker, your cohort, your partner in crime. See what Chris Vecsey is up to. What'd you say, Chris?
Not a whole lot. Dusty, I think I need you to come in, though. I'm done for the day, and I need somebody to take my place.
Going to need you to come in here and handle this. Thanks. That'd be great. Yeah. The TPS reports.
Yeah, don't forget the cover sheet.
What you been up to, man? I saw you went to the pumpkin patch yesterday.
Yeah, a little bit of everything. A little bit inshore, off the beach, a little surf fishing. Dusty and I went out this morning, tried to get some pompano for the hatchery. We got a whole one of them. That north wind was just kind of brutal. And
it was rough this morning.
We hooked a few fish, but it was tough. And the Spanish mackerel were relentless. I say that like it's a bad thing. If you wanted to go out right now and just have some fun fishing, if you hit Perdido Pass and around the jetties of just, gotcha plugs, spoons, I'm pretty sure you could keep your rods bent pretty much the entire time you're there.
Or pompano jigs. They love pompano jigs.
They love pompano jigs, especially when you have them on 20-pound fluorocarbon. They usually keep them too because they like them so much.
Yeah, they decided to take them home. We lost a good $50 worth of jigs this morning.
Man, that's a great thing. I mean, Spanish mackerel are super fun to fight, and I think they're great table fare.
Fresh Spanish is not bad at all. It's definitely not
fresh for sure.
It's definitely not
bled and fresh.
Freeze. Yeah, you don't put them in the freezer.
Well, so what else you been up to inshore, man? Let's get an east side inshore report.
Certain spots are still holding a lot of trout. It's pretty much a matter of cherry picking the creeks that don't get, muddied out after a big rain like we've had, because even though we've had a couple days of really pretty weather, it doesn't take a lot of riding around the boat to realize that most creeks are dumping out some pretty nasty stuff. So getting certain creeks, I'm not going to say names. I'm going to make people do a little bit of their own homework, but certain creeks that, have that nice dark tannic water or not putting out a bunch of mud are still holding, some trout and actually a lot of nice slot reds. And you can take those fish on really a variety of stuff, live baits or artificials. Pretty much this past week, you could catch them on like wake baits were working real well, and then just paddle tails, a lot of different colors, soft plastic paddle tails. Darker colors were actually working considerably better. Stuff that's in like root beer, a dark green, almost like colors you'd use normally for bass. A lot of those dark natural colors are working best. But there's some really nice fish in those creeks.
What do you think's most important right now? I know we've had a lot, like you talk about the creeks bleeding out. I know we've talked about, or we have, a ton of fresh water coming down from middle of the state. I'm not sure. I know we've talked about it before, how it affects you guys differently over there than it does us over here. But are you more focused on water clarity, salinity, or what are you kind of focusing on right now to where you're going to find fish?
Definitely salinity. You get into water that's too fresh right now, it's like you can always catch, if you have moving water, even though it'd be low salinity, you'll probably find some redfish in a spot like that. Trout seem to get pushed around a lot more by it. There were some trout on some of the deeper reefs and stuff here inshore in Orange Beach last week, and you're probably going to start finding good numbers of them off the beach. There are already some fish caught off the beach, but as you get these spring rains and it makes that salinity drop in the bay, it pushes a lot of fish out along the beachfront. This is typically the time of year where I start, walking the beaches, working those nearshore troughs for trout, redfish, flounder, and all the above. But trout in particular, when you get a lot of a lot of rain and that salinity drops real fast, that's what's going to push them out on the beach.
That's a great thing to know. I was actually asking Captain Bobby about that last week, if he thought all the fresh water coming through the sound and down the bay would push those trout onto the Gulf Beach. And he was kind of saying that he thinks there's a whole nother breed of trout that kind of lives from the Gulf to those beaches. What do you think?
I mean, it's very possible. They might come out on the beaches more due to temperature than anything, but the fact is you don't see a lot of those trout on the beach year round. So either they're out there because the temperature, once it hits a certain point, pushes them out there, or it's a group of trout that just get pushed out from that lower salinity. I wouldn't say that what he's saying could absolutely be true. How you could, I guess, prove the theory would be a tough one without. You'd have to tag them for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I've meant to do the last couple of years, but I've kind of slacked on that. I'm really good at remembering tags for redfish, not so good for trout.
Right. Well, tell us a little bit about your pumpkin patch with the fly rod yesterday.
Well, basically, the reds have been kind of coming up in flurries off the beach for last 2 weeks or so. A lot of good action, mostly with reds. Some of those schools are holding big jack, but good flurries off the beach. And the cool thing is, if you're one of them people that does not like to get up early and go fishing, you're in luck, because realistically, that fishery is a lot better middle of the day to afternoon. And a lot of it's visual. You're kind of just running around, gunning, and sight fishing. You're looking for the schools of those reds. Obviously, you're looking for birds. Now, where I was at yesterday versus where I saw some good video, some surface action, in different spots along Orange Beach in particular. But where we were at, the fish were not up top. So you didn't have that obvious sign of splashing and birds diving and all that. You actually had to look for the redfish themselves just under the surface. And luckily, it's pretty easy as long as the water is relatively clear. You'll be riding along, you're looking at that nice green water, and all of a sudden you got a big dark kind of reddish or brownish shadow. And that's all those reds schooled up. And I mean, some of these schools, you're talking over 1,000 fish in a school. So it's not an inconspicuous thing. It's not like coming up on a little group of fish. You have these huge schools of reds to throw at. Basically, me and my wife just bombed them. She was throwing bucktail jigs at them. We threw topwater lures at them. And then, of course, I was throwing that flies at them. But we had pretty good action all afternoon.
It seems like you're back to like the different schools of trout, some being in the river, some being in the Gulf and whatnot. It seems as if the beach trout are a lot bigger and fatter and all that. Every trout I've ever caught off the beach, whether it's 14 inches or 20 inches or plus, they have a lot more girth to them, and they're always just a lot more solid fish. They fight a lot harder.
I was just about to say they fight different. They look different. I agree.
Yeah, they're just tanks. Is that because of diet, or is that something that kind of goes back to different schools of fish, or wherever those fish are wintering, or whatever it may be? Is there any reason behind that? My guess
to any of that is that, and this kind of would coincide. My thoughts on it would coincide with what Bobby theorizes on that is a group of fish that I think stays in pretty high current turbulent areas. It's no different than when we fish for bass in rivers, whether it's smallmouth, shoal bass, and stuff like that. Those fish are built a lot different than a largemouth that sits in a pond. They're always thicker throughout their body, real wide shoulders. And that's the same with those beach trout. They really are almost like a different species. They're a lot heavier bodies, like you pointed out. They're certainly more aggressive. And whereas a trout in the bay, it gives you a tussle. You really get a lot of head shakes. You get some short spurt runs. Those beach trout will actually take off on some really nice runs. They know how to get on their sides and dig kind of like a redfish. They're really more of like a bluefish mentality out there. So I think that's why I've always loved going out there and plugging along for those beach trout. They're a lot more aggressive, and they're just a more impressive fish altogether.
I know there's no way of knowing for sure, but do you think those fish maybe winter, especially it seems like a lot of trout fishing goes on like Fort Morgan and in the western part of the island. Do you think those fish are wintering in deeper water in the Gulf, or, deeper holes in like Mobile Bay and the channel, or do you think all of them end up in a river somewhere?
I don't think those fish end up in rivers personally. I think those fish probably hang around the rigs in the bay, and they probably stay deep. There's also,
I think they're going offshore a little bit even.
Some of them very well, because I know like my brother and other divers I've known have seen them in the winter and in the fall, like in Perdido Pass, for example, in that deep water along the bridge abutments. Those fish are down in, 20 plus feet of water, and there'll be decent sized schools of them. And those same guys will talk about seeing them out at the rigs in 40, 50 feet of water. Now, obviously, there's not a lot of divers in Mobile Bay. It would be interesting to see if, those fish hold in the bay along those channels and those deeper inshore rigs through the winter. But I honestly do not think that those big, heavier beach fish, I don't think they go up in the rivers. I really don't. I've never caught a fish in the rivers that time of year with those kind of dimensions to them.
I would agree with that. And Captain Bobby was saying last week too, or him and Patrick were kind of just talking, back and forth. I'm saying those fish aren't. We were talking about more like Mobile Bay fish as far as ship channel goes, and those fish may very well bury up in the ship channel, in 50 or 60 foot of water. But how do you get to them? I know in Virginia Beach, whenever I lived up there for a little while, those guys caught those giant, 70, I don't know exactly, 60, 70 pound striped bass on eel at the very, very, very bottom of those ship channels. Thought that was interesting. And I kind of thought to myself, I wonder if you could do the same thing, like with some kind of big bait, drop it down at the bottom of the ship channel when it's super, super cold, December, January, February. It'd be interesting to see.
Yeah, I think a bigger live bait would definitely be the ticket. I don't think drifting live shrimp through there, for example. I think a croaker, a mullet, something along those lines. Some of the trout I've caught in the winter back in the day, Little Lagoon, parts of even parts of the intercoastal in the dead of winter. We always use mullet that were, we're talking 7 to 9 inch mullet, not finger mullet. And that's how we always got those bigger trout to bite.
Yep, that makes sense, man. All right. Well, you got the Hey Cap question this week, and I think this kind of want to play off both of you guys. Y'all can have a little discussion. Brian McCrary asks, "Hey Cap, what is the best way to target mangrove snapper inshore?" And he even goes a little further and he asks, "What type of structure should I look for?" What do you think, Chris?
I mean, I've always all right, there's two different, I'm going to say, inshores when it comes to mangrove. Like if you're ever here in Orange Beach, you say inshore, I'm thinking the jetties, I'm thinking back in the bays, which means you could be fishing the public reefs or you could be fishing docks and some of the smaller jetty systems like along the north side of Ono Island, for example. Over in Mobile Bay, inshore could be those, obviously the nearshore rigs. You have smaller artificial reefs just outside the bay. In my experience, inshore fishing for mangrove snapper, and I actually used to do quite a bit of it, chumming, for one, makes a giant difference versus just drifting back a live shrimp or something like that. Chumming and then using some kind of live fish like a pinfish. Later on in the summer, we'll get the LYs, which are little sardines, small finger mullet. Any kind of small live bait fish almost always dictates a better quality mangrove snapper. And here they have to be 12 inches to keep. So, whereas in Florida, you could hit just about any deeper boat dock. You could hit the bridges over there and you could load up on those 10 plus inch snapper. Over here in Alabama, being 12 inches, it's amazing how many you catch that are 11 and a half, 11 and 3/4, 11 and 7/8. You're almost always just shy of that. But if you take the time to catch your own live bait and catch some kind of bait fish over using live shrimp and then add a little bit of chumming into the equation, especially around the nearshore reefs and around some of those rock jetties, I've always done considerably better on that. It just takes a little bit more involvement.
And I've heard the same thing. Something to mention here is you do need a reef. Well, you need the reef fish endorsement in Alabama to catch those, correct?
Yep. Nowadays you do.
So I figured that was worth mentioning. Go ahead, Dusty. What you think?
I was going to say, back to the chumming, live chumming is something that, you see it a lot in South Florida and stuff. And I know I've used it as a tip before on here, and it's something I always did. Inshore guiding was if I may be using shrimp or mullet or whatever, but if I had the opportunity to catch some LYs or pogies even and keep them alive, I would try to catch a good many of them. And I had a few docks that I favored, especially deeper docks closer to channels. And I'll look for docks that have bigger surface areas that have a lot more shade, not just a pier with some pilings, but an actual dock with a flat surface area that's going to put out a good amount of square footage. That's got a lot of shade. It seemed like that held more fish and also bigger fish. But live chumming, I would, you don't have to empty out the live well at once, but get 5 or 6 baits and I'd scoop them up, give them a little squeeze in the net just to slow them down, and then sling them into there against that dock, and they'll get in there and start kind of swirling around in circles, and that pulls those fish out, and especially those bigger fish. A lot of times you'll even be able to see them, and you'll be able to pitch a live bait at those bigger fish. And it's definitely, if you're fishing a high pressured area like Orange Beach, there's 5,000 inshore guides over here, and every dock gets fished every single day. A lot of them, every dock's going to have a mangrove snapper, especially as you get into the fall or August, September. But it seems like, certain docks hold bigger fish for certain reasons. And, if you have one that's getting fished a lot, you can still pull off fish by using a bigger live bait and live chumming. It seems like that kind of weeds through those smaller fish. And even if they're kind of weary and been pressured a lot, you can still pull some bites off of just about any dock by doing that.
And I haven't done a whole lot of this mangrove snapper fishing. I've caught them. I've never really targeted them specifically, but I've heard you have to leader down quite a bit.
A lot.
Yeah.
You got to scale your leader, your hook size, and you'll do 10 times better if you free line baits versus, weighing them down or floating them or anything like that. Sometimes you're in heavy current or something, the fish are holding deep, you just got to do what you got to do. But anytime you can drop your hook size down and drop your leader size down, you'll definitely see more success on those fish. As far as snapper go, them and mutton snapper have definitely been the pickiest as far as being able to see your gear and react to it. They definitely have some good eyesight.
And another thing too that I like to do is something I use in the surf a lot. And we have them at the shop, is those little crusher jigs or yellowtail jigs. And it's a very stout hook, but it's small and it's got just a little bit of lead. I think we have 1/16 and 1/8 ounce. It allows you to pitch a bait. You can cast a little further. You're still freelining technically, but it's a weighted hook. It's not necessarily a jig head, but it's a weighted hook. Perfect for pitching live baits around docks. It gets you, a little deeper if you got some current, and get a little more accurate casts. I love using those things for the mangroves and stuff like that. They're a very versatile thing that not a lot of people use around here.
Yep, that definitely makes sense, man. That's a great question, Brian. We appreciate that. That's a great answer, Chris and Dusty. Brian's going to get a prize back from the Slick Lure. Brian, make sure you email us your shipping address to alabama@bestfishingreport.com to redeem your Slick Lures. Chris, we appreciate the report, man. If folks want to get up with you and pick your brain, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Pretty much, you can always, of course, come down to the shop. We're open 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. every single day. You can give us a call at the store at 251-981-4245. You can find us on Instagram at Sam's Tackle OB. Obviously, best experience is come on down to the shop, talk some fishing with us.
Awesome, dude. We appreciate the report and look forward to talking with you next time. That was a great segment, guys. Let's take a break and hear from one of this week's sponsors. This week's show is brought to us by CCA Alabama, a great way to support conservation projects like the Claude Petite Flounder and Speckled Trout Hatchery in the University of South Alabama Cobia Tagging Project is through the purchase of a distinctive CCA Alabama saltwater fishing license plate. You guys head over to Alabama Department of Revenue's distinctive license plate page at revenue.gov to get yours. All right, Captain Dusty, we got to do What Did You Learn? What'd you learn this week?
Yeah, I mean, it's cool talking swordfish. It's something that I've actually not done a lot. I've been one time, so I'm very inexperienced, but I'm around a lot of people that do it a lot, like Chris and Mark that I work with, and so talking with Richard and just kind of picking his brain. I basically don't know enough to do it myself, but just listening to it all the time is something that's just intriguing because it's a very technical thing, and fishing in general, that's what makes it fun, is this little niche stuff, and swordfish is definitely one of those things where,
for sure, it's a lot to it, man. You're dropping down a bait, 1,000 feet, 1,500 feet. We're talking about quarter a mile. That's a long way down. There's a lot can go wrong, so I think it's always interesting to see how different folks do it.
Yeah. And yeah, just, I mean, everything, and even him saying what he learned last time he went, about dropping the baits down and all that. It's just really cool to have. It's always a learning experience. It don't matter how often you've done anything. You're definitely learning every time you go. And it's, like I said, sword fishing is one of those things that's growing popularity. I think it's just cool that Richard is doing it on his own and also taking his own time to learn these things and figuring out like, hey, I messed up, or not necessarily messed up, but this is a mistake.
Learn
I made.
this. Sure. Absolutely.
And you gotta, to learn, you gotta do something not right the first time. And
yeah. Oh yeah. I
you
say
know.
all the time on here, I may not know how to catch them all, but I've definitely lost them all. Like I know how to look. I know how to screw up pretty much everything. So that's the only reason I'm halfway decent at some of the things I do.
And I'm always respectful to anybody that's willing to say, you know, hey, I learned this because I didn't do this right. That just, it goes a long way to show, you know, how somebody is and all that stuff. So I thought that was awesome. You know, that he learned something from, you know, he realized what he was doing. But what about you?
Man, I think talk about something that's gaining popularity, like we talked about in the very beginning, Pompano fishing and just surf fishing as a whole. I did a little bit of it the past couple of weeks. Entered the Alabama Pomp Stomp with you guys over there at Sam's. Sounds like you got to hit the cuts right now and be willing to move around a little bit. If that particular cut's not working out for you, figure out why. Be able and or willing to move around a little bit, find the right cut. And, you know, by cut, I think he calls them rips. I call them cuts just because from my offshore background, a rip is something totally different than what you guys call a rip. But you got to focus on where the fish want to be. So I think that's what stuck out to me this week was really focus on those rips and be willing to move around.
Well, like you're saying, you know, rips offshore, a lot of times we have cuts, but sometimes we have rips as well. You know, we'll have dirty water meeting clean water.
Yep.
You'll have an actual rip. I mean, you know, those currents are meeting. One's going north, one's going south, or vice versa. You're correct. Yeah, we look for a lot of cuts, but also too, sometimes it's not just beach structure like sandbar wise, but it's currents. You know, like it might just be the same all the way down, but there's two currents swirling, and that's why we'll call it a rip, because it's not necessarily as on this big scale like you would have offshore, where you have miles and miles of cobalt water to dirty pea water, but you have dirtiest water.
Still different current and different water clarities.
Different color. And another thing, this time of year, I tell people all the time, is in the summer, it's like, you know, warm water is warm water. But like in the spring and late fall and winter, if you have a lot of rainwater and you have some cleaner Gulf water, sometimes one's warmer than the other, but man, there might be a 7 or 8 degree difference, or it might only be 4 or 5, but that's enough to, you know, 68 to 64 is enough to make a big difference. Those fish may not be 64. So sometimes that warmer water is huge. And you'll notice with the dirtier water, like after we get a bunch of rain, you know, you'll have the stain to the water. And it's when you're down there catching sand fleas or whatever, it's kind of bites you. So it's almost a little cooler. And, you know, that's all that fresh water and it's in rainwater. It's enough to keep fish out of it sometimes. And sometimes it doesn't matter.
It's enough to make a distinction where which side you want to be on. Yeah.
And all it basically goes to show is you got to be willing to be on the move. You know, you can't just go out somewhere and sit down and say, all right, this is where I'm fishing all day long.
See, that's my problem with surf fishing. Usually whenever I sit down, that's where I'm at.
And you know, there's nothing wrong with that. That's what makes it fun. That's what keeps it something where anybody can do. And there's days where, man, you can just pop a spot somewhere and sit down and drink some beer and catch fish all day long. And then there's other days where if you're being serious and you're like, hey, you know, I want to catch some pompano today, I got to cover some ground. That's what you have to do. So, you know, it's a very broad thing. And I think it really boils down to what your expectations are. If you're trying to catch 30 fish that day and you know, hey, this is my one day all month I'm going to fish, then you got to put some effort into it. But you know, if you go 3 or 4 times a week and you just like being out there, being outside, being on the beach, catching a couple of fish, this time of year, especially April, I mean, you almost can't not go somewhere and catch pompano. And you may only catch 1, you may only catch 12, but you know, you just got to go. So it really boils down to what day it is and what
expectations.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, I agree with you. All right, folks, this week's What'd You Learn sponsor is Fishbites. Are you tired of scrambling for bait whenever you decide to go fishing? Have an artificial bait that's better than live bait ready to go at a moment's notice with Fishbites. It's easy to pack and travel with, and it's also shelf stable, and not to mention tough. With Fishbites, the bait stays on the hook and the fish stay on the bait. Check out the full line of scented saltwater, freshwater, and tackle at fishbites.com. All right, Captain Dusty, man, I always appreciate your wisdom, and I definitely appreciate you co-hosting with me this week. I had a good time.
Yeah, man, I really do enjoy co-hosting. It'll
be a good report. Got a lot of good information. Got to check in with the Beach Bum. Got to see what old Vecsey's up to, and it's always good to hear from old Captain Blood, old what I call it, the naughty pup. I like that one. That's a pretty good one.
We need to call him the Hush Puppy.
Hush Puppy. Oh my God, that's great.
Oh, Captain Hush Puppy.
All right, man. Like I said, I appreciate you being with me this week. If folks want to get up with you, and I know you work down there at Sam's with Chris. If folks want to get up with you and book a trip or pick your brain or just whatever, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, the best thing to do is you can reach me on my cell at 678-897-0167, or like Chris said earlier, you can find us at Sam's. We love people that listen to the podcast. We've met so many of y'all, and we really appreciate it when y'all come in, just hang out with us and talk fishing with us. And, we're willing to help you with whatever, whether it be tackle or boat stuff or, bait, whatever you may need. So that's the best way, if you want to come down there and chit chat with us, or, said we're willing to help you from anything to sword fishing to pompano fishing, we'll get you covered up. So,
yep, definitely. We appreciate you guys' contribution to the podcast, and always appreciate you guys willing to hold our listeners' hands. And like I said, I was in there a couple of weeks ago, so not even our listeners. I'm always looking for some help. So we appreciate you taking care of our listener base here.
Yes, sir.
All right, folks, that's going to wrap it up this week. You guys, please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like us to email you the podcast each week, just text the word fishing to 314-665-1767. Again, just text the word fishing to 314-665-1767. Subscribe to our email list, and we'll send you the new show each week. We'll see y'all next week. You guys keep whacking them. This week's Alabama Saltwater Fishing Report was brought to you by Dixie Supply and Baker Metal Works, are proud to be your metal roofing headquarters for over 40 years. Save time and money by buying from the most reliable manufacturer on the Gulf Coast. Buy it today, pick it up today. With the addition of their new store in Cantonment, Florida, they now have 8 locations to serve you. Dixie Supply and Baker Metal Works, your metal roofing headquarters. Also brought to you by Daycool Heating and Air. Pros at Daycool have been servicing Mobile and Baldwin counties for over a decade. Contact them at 251-633-5121 or check them out online at www.daycoolair.com. They are license number AL07028. Also brought to you by Advanced Transmission in Spanish Fort. Give the professionals a call who have been trusted on the Gulf Coast for over 25 years at 251-626-6061 or check them out online at www.advanced-transmission.com. And also brought to you by SunSouth. For quality John Deere equipment affordably priced, visit your neighbors at SunSouth. Visit your local SunSouth and check them out on the web at www.sunsouth.com.
This week's Saltwater Fishing Report is brought to you by Angelo Depaola, the Coastal Connection with eXp Realty, your boating and beach property specialist. Check me out on Facebook at Angelo Depaola Realtor, the Coastal Connection, or call me direct at 850-287-3440.
And also brought to you by Test Calibration. Test Calibration is your source for sales and service of diesel turbochargers and fuel injection systems since 1976. Contact them at 800-822-0057 or visit them online at testcalibratindieselandturbo.com. And also brought to you by Bucks Island. They have new pontoon boats, bass boats, bow riders, and aluminum boats for sale. They provide boat service on all kinds of boats, even if they weren't purchased from Bucks. Visit them at 4500 Highway 77 in Southside, Alabama, or give them a call at 256-442-2588. And also brought to you by the Alabama Marine Resources Division. The Alabama Marine Resources Division reminds all recreational anglers that gray triggerfish, greater amberjack, or red snapper must be reported through Snapper Check prior to landing the fish in Alabama. For more information about Snapper Check, please visit OutdoorAlabama.com.